people that don't want to see thousands of innocent animals slaughtered for no good reason, and that includes the cattle. My name's Mark Jones. I work for the Born Free Foundation. I'm a vet by training. So thank you all for coming. Thank you for caring about wildlife. I'd like to thank the organisers of the march here. I'd like to thank fellow speakers, Dominic and Peter. I've had a long time being involved in this issue. I've been involved in the Wounded Badger Patrols in Gloucestershire, which were inspirational when they were set up 2 or 3 years ago, and continue to be so, trying to protect badgers in an area of the country where they're being slaughtered and have been being shot over the past 3 years in the name of TB control. Now, as you know, the Born Free Foundation, the organisation that I work for, was founded by the actress Virginia McKenna and her husband Bill Travers, who starred in the film Born Free, which was released 50 years ago this year. So it's a big year for us. Virginia's very passionate about this issue, and although unfortunately she can't be here with us today, she has asked me to read out a short statement here, which I read out at all of these marches. So if you bear with me, this is from Virginia McKenna. Now, not only does there seem to be no logic in possibly extending the badger cull, but this plan also means the decision makers have disregarded the suffering caused to the badgers by the culling methods used. Little by little, wild creatures are being eliminated from nature. It would seem that the authorities never consider what wild animals contribute to the balance of the natural world. They waste thousands of pounds on this slaughter as if there was no alternative to defeat the transmission of TB to cattle. The choice is life for all. That's from Virginia McKenna. So she's very, very much with us in spirit today. The badger culls. Well, I want to talk to you as a vet a little bit about the veterinary involvement here, and I'd like to say that veterinary support for the badger culls isn't essential to the government, but it's been really, really important in terms of the government continuing to justify what we consider to be an unjustifiable policy. So getting the vets and their organisations, the British Veterinary Association and veterinary organisations, to look at this issue again and re-evaluate their support for this policy is really, really important. We've had 3 years of badger culling in Somerset and Gloucestershire. Dorset was added last year. Around 4,000 badgers have been killed under licence to date, almost none of which have been tested for bovine TB, the overwhelming majority of which will have been perfectly healthy and which pose no risk to anyone or anything. Now, in spite of this year, as you'll know, 29 new applications for culling licences in the west and southwest of England have been received by Natural England. And those licence applications across 9 counties cover a total area of around 10,000 square kilometres. I can't think in terms of square kilometres, but to give you an idea, that's roughly the size of Yorkshire, our largest county. So we could potentially see culling badgers extended across a massive area. We don't know exactly where these applications have come from, but it's widely expected that anything up to 10 of them will receive licences for culling to begin later this year. So this policy could see tens of thousands more badgers killed over the coming years, and the population across the west and southwest of England reduced by up to a half. Now, nobody, least of all me as a vet, denies that bovine TB is a big issue for farmers, and we have to recognise that. In 2014 alone, 33,000 cattle were slaughtered prematurely because they tested positive for bovine TB, or they were what they call in-contact animals. The cost to the taxpayer has been massive, around 500 million over the last 10 years in compensation payments, in the costs of testing and so forth. And TB outbreaks cost individual farmers many thousands of pounds, and they have huge impacts on those farmers' businesses. So we have to remember that farmers are really suffering as a result of this disease, and we have to figure out how to get on top of it. But this situation has not come about because of badgers, as many in the government and the National Farmers Union would have you believe, but because of inadequate controls and poor industry practices over many years. Just because the costs of cattle TB are high This is not an excuse for laying the blame on innocent wild animals. Farmers have been duped by the government and the National Farmers Union into believing that killing badgers will somehow help to purge the curse of bovine TB, which devastates so many farming businesses and lives. But slaughtering badgers will not help struggling farmers. Now, in trying to defend the policy, the government and the National Farmers Union will say TB is a devastating disease for both cattle and wildlife. Actually, this isn't true. It's not the disease that's devastating. Most cattle, most badgers that contract TB will never become ill as a result of it. It's the way we go about trying to control it using techniques that were developed back in the 1950s and which were originally developed to prevent us, humans, getting bovine TB, which used to be a big problem. Bovine TB is no longer a risk to public health thanks to milk pasteurisation and human vaccination. And as I say, very few badgers or cattle will ever live long enough to develop clinical tuberculosis, even if they become infected. So anyone that tells you that we need badger culls to ensure a future with healthy badgers and healthy cattle is talking nonsense. The vast majority of badgers being targeted under this policy will be perfectly healthy and will present no risk at all. The government and the NFU will say you can't get bovine TB under control without dealing with the reservoir in badgers. This is not true. The only real piece of science designed to look at the impact of killing badgers on TB in cattle was the so-called randomised badger culling trial, which took the best part of 10 years, £50 million of taxpayers' money, and cost 11,000 badgers their lives. And the conclusion of the scientists that conducted and analysed that trial was that badger culling can make no meaningful contribution to the control of TB in cattle in Britain. The government and the NFU will say no country has controlled TB successfully without dealing with the wildlife reservoir. Again, this is not true. Here in the UK, we got TB in cattle under control from a very bad situation back in the late 1950s and early 1960s through strict controls over cattle trade 10 years before we even knew badgers could become infected. They will say shooting badgers is a humane way of killing them because it's no different from shooting other kinds of wildlife. Again, this is not true. After the first year of these culls in Gloucestershire and Somerset, the government's own independent expert panel found that up to a quarter of badgers shot at probably took more than 5 minutes to die in those culls. And the experts concluded that these badgers were therefore at risk of experiencing marked pain and were extremely concerned about the implications that had for humaneness. And to imply other wild animals that are shot don't suffer is clearly an indefensible claim. They will say the badger culls are already working. Again, this is not true. Even our chief government vet, who's a big supporter of badger culls, by the way, admits it's impossible to draw such conclusions. And there's actually some evidence that last year, the culls over the last 3 years could actually be making the situation worse for cattle in Dorset, Gloucester and Somerset, as many scientists predicted that it would. And they'll say, we need to use all the tools in the box. Well, that's absurd. You don't use all the tools in the box, you use the tools that work and that don't involve the completely unnecessary and unjustified wholesale slaughter of wildlife. Killing badgers should never be a tool in the box for controlling TB in cattle. The message we're hearing from government and the National Farmers Union is nothing more than rhetoric and lies. Farmers, cattle and our wildlife are all being badly let down by this policy. We need to have a complete rethink of the whole TB control policy, and we need to stop focusing our attention on badgers. Now, just a word about my profession, the veterinary profession. A lot of folk I speak to are quite surprised when I say the veterinary profession or its professional bodies are supportive of these culls. Surely the veterinary profession is all about animal welfare, so surely they wouldn't support these because badgers are suffering as a result. But I'm sad to say that it's true. The veterinary profession or its professional bodies do support the culls. Badger culling is supported by many individual vets who seem to think they should do whatever their farm clients ask of them. It's supported by the British Veterinary Association, which is heavily influenced by vested interests within the profession, and it's supported by our Chief Government Vet's Office and his staff, presumably because their jobs depend on it. The problem here is that many vets simply don't understand the science behind the control of TB in cattle. Many have vested interests, I'm sad to say, and a lot of vets will claim the welfare of badgers or other wild animals is nothing to do with them because these animals aren't directly under their care. Well, let me say this. Before supporting badger culls, or for that matter any harmful wildlife interventions, vets and our professional bodies like the British Veterinary Association had better be damn sure there will be a substantial and guaranteed benefit, be damn sure there's no alternative, be damn sure the methods are humane, and be absolutely confident that there won't be any other negative consequences like illegal persecution or impacts on non-target animals. These badger culls fail on every single count, and the veterinary profession, my profession, has absolutely no business supporting them. Now, myself and a number of colleagues, there's a lot of vets who do oppose these culls, and myself and a number of colleagues have spent the last 6 months trying to persuade the British Veterinary Association to meet with us to discuss their position. It's taken us 6 months to get them to agree to that, but they have agreed to that. So we're going into the offices of the British Veterinary Association next month, and we'll be putting our case very strongly that they at the very least need to take a step back and think about what they're supporting here. Ladies and gentlemen, this isn't just about the 4,000 badgers who've lost their lives for no good reason in the West Country over the past 3 years. It's not even just about the tens of thousands more badgers that could be killed over the coming years. It's about the attitudes of our government, our industries, our vets and our society towards our wildlife. Wild animals all over the world are disappearing fast, and we're systematically destroying the nature on which ultimately we all depend. In its election manifesto, this government stated, and I quote, "Our moors and meadows, wildlife and nature, air and water are a crucial part of our national identity and make our country what it is. So we care about them deeply, want to protect them for everyone and pass them on to future generations." Have a look in the manifesto, that's what it says. Now, all I can say is that the indiscriminate killing of badgers for no good reason isn't much of a way of fulfilling that commitment. Blaming wildlife for the problems we create and licensing the slaughter of tens of thousands of innocent wild animals is just not good enough, and this government and the proponents of this obscene policy need to hear that message loud and clear. Thank you very much.